Hello, everyone, and thank you for tuning in to this session. Normally, this would be my approximately monthly AMA, but it's a little bit different today. Also, this is the last one of these I'll be doing on a regular basis because we are going to have Boris taking this role going forward, and we'll get back a little bit to how he sees continuing these types of formats. But for me, it's the last time for now, unless there's a special occasion that I'll be doing this. So thank you very much for having tuned in many times in the past year and asking a lot of good questions. So today it's not really an AMA, but if time allows, we might take a few questions towards the end, but I think it's more important to get you introduced to Boris, who is the new CEO. But do feel free to put in questions wherever you're watching this in the commentary section. That being said, let's keep it to questions relating to Boris coming on board, what we're planning from here. We're not going to go into detailed technical questions today about wallets or interoperability between blockchains or anything like that. So let's keep it on strategy and what we are going from here. And we'll try to see if we have time to take a few of those questions towards the end. But for now, it is a great pleasure to welcome you, Boris Bohrer-Bilowitzki, BBB, Triple B, to Concordium and to your new role as a CEO of the company. You that have watched this know that we've been looking for a CEO for quite some time. There's been a number of very good candidates, and we appreciate very much anybody that has shown interest in this. But I must say I'm very pleased that we have ended here where we have with you, Boris, and I greatly looking forward to working with you, but will be withdrawing back to the kind of chairman role I used to have in this project and actually prefer to have. So I won't be sitting on your shoulder whispering you into your ears all the time. So let's start with hearing a little bit about you, Boris. You know, before today, the 4th of September, what have you been doing up to now, and tell us a little bit about your background.
Absolutely. Also here, a welcome hello from my side, not a welcome, but hello. I'm very excited to be able to take this role on and lead Concordium into the next realm of hopefully meteoric success. I'm originally from Liechtenstein. For people, don't confuse it with Luxembourg. It's a very tiny principality in between Austria and Switzerland. I grew up there. Wonderful childhood. Very boring. At the end of the day, what happened to me, I was always fascinated by finance. I decided to study economics. Was in Vienna. There was a brokerage excursion at the end of the day through a couple of hoops. Found myself in Zurich doing various entrepreneurial attempts, which quite a few of them don't work out, as we know, but a few of them do, which led me ultimately to London, where I met my then future business partner, and we started a company called Copper, which I think in the crypto space is actually quite well known by now. Really infrastructure, custody, prime brokerage services, which has grown successfully over the course of the last 6.5 years. And I kind of felt that it was time to do something new. We started talking, and it now resulted in me with great excitement taking over Concordium. And plan to do some big things with it. Great.
Let's stay on Copper for a second, because that's where we got to know each other when you were at Copper. And Copper, of course, is an important infrastructure provider to Concordium and to very many other players, and is really, I guess, an infrastructure play. You help making exchanges more secure by providing custody, etc. Could you talk a little bit to what you did at Copper and how that might come in useful in this situation?
Yeah. So for people who don't know, Copper is one of the largest custodians and by now prime infrastructure and prime brokerage service providers in the world. It all started with, the need of institutional custody, which quite frankly at the time wasn't existent, like beginning of 2018, end of 17. But Copper very quickly realized that there needs to be more work done in order to service institutional clients for them to, for example, raise funds. And at that point, the whole risk mitigating factors that come with that decision from an infrastructural perspective comes into play. And I think the core flagship product that Copper is currently running and is building out is a product called Clearloop, touching on the exchanges, which is very important for Concordium as well. Where after FTX, you don't find yourself in a position where you have to pre-fund the exchanges. You hold your assets, your collateral off exchange. Also, the exchanges hold collateral at third-party custody, and transactions settle there. A P&L settles there. Which means, of course, that by default, you have a very good relationship with the big players in the industry. I mean, Clearloop, by the time that I left in July, was doing around $140 billion of transaction volume per month via this infrastructure. And that, of course, is quite, a big success story in itself. And with that, of course, came the point where some sort of an entrepreneurial spirit that I carry deeply in me is not really needed anymore. It's a well-operated institution by now, a corporation that needs different people. And we, over the course of the last 2-3 years, have hired those people, and they really have now taken over. In terms of like the operational work, my role was the chief commercial officer, so I was in charge of everything that basically faced the street and the strategy wrapped around it of how we get the business successful. I've done my part. This has been handed over to very, very knowledgeable and subject matter experts from prime brokerage, 20 years of that experience in big bulge brackets, global investment banks. So it was kind of the time, like so many things in life, timing is very, very important.
Yeah, I mean, what you say resonated a little bit with me back in my Saxo Bank days, which also obviously was an entrepreneurial business at the early stages, but as you grow bigger and bigger, it's a slightly different story. And I think if you really have an entrepreneurial spirit, sometimes you miss that a little bit when a business becomes very established. I wouldn't say bureaucratic, but not quite as nimble and quite as focused on building new business, etc. So I'm also very happy and I think that was a very important point for me when we were discussing this, is the fact that you are an entrepreneur and you want to build stuff and you want to build business, and I think that is really very critical to get any business successful. You have somebody driving that and trying to drive the business itself, of course.
Especially in an industry like ours. Like this is, okay, it's undoubtable that everybody on this planet by now has heard the word blockchain or crypto, or like everybody is vaguely aware. If you actually dig deeper, there are very few people on this planet that actually understand what you can do with this. From a pure alpha generator, profit generating perspective, there is enough there in terms of like the infrastructure also that Copper has built, which I'm extremely proud of. When you set out to build a business like this, you never think that it would get to the heights that it does. And sometimes you open your eyes and suddenly it's there. But on the other side, of course, it's very good to have seen and experienced those rises and falls in this industry, which actually can be boiled down quite a lot to the same mistakes that are being made. Making a business successful, in my opinion, is very much centered around laser sharp focus, which is, in my opinion, something that Concordium needs at this current stage. And then just measurable results, small wins that you can build on, and subsequently, make the community happy. Internal stakeholders are happy, and everything. That doesn't mean it goes without problems, right? There are always unhappy times or less good times, and then there are fantastic times, right? But it's like finding that balance. If you get that right, it's actually not that difficult. There are certain steps that need to be taken, certain decisions that need to be taken, and if you do that, from my experience, it does work out.
Just before we go to a little bit deeper into what you're seeing for Concordium and what you're going to do here, I'd just like to stay on copper and infrastructure and your network, because I remember a couple of times in the past years, before we even started this discussion, I had one or two people I wanted to speak to and get hold of, and you kindly introduced me to a couple of industry people, right? So you obviously have a strong network, and also at Concordium we have a number of exchanges, but not as many as we'd like to have. Probably not built that infrastructure as broadly as we'd like to. What are your thoughts? I mean, is this something that'll be easier for you to do than we have found it?
Like if you look at the base data, it should be, but it also depends on the approach that you take. So yes, there is a Rolodex that is available through years and years servicing them, and those couple of years, if you would translate this into the traditional world, is like decades, right? Because it's so nascent. So and the good thing is, in this industry, everybody's open for new things. It just depends of how you translate them into something actually usable. There are various ideas that flop around, but I mean the core problem is, and I think if you just look at the community as a whole, there are some unhappy peppies because in terms of liquidity and price action, it is not where, I think in terms of the work that has been done, it doesn't really reflect where the coin is currently priced, which is, again, a communication, internal focus piece that needs to happen. But the idea of being able to have a broad set of infrastructural players that make it accessible for you to trade, to get hold of stake, whatever it is, right? There is a strategy that I've got in my head of how this to be done, and I think not just copper, but of course my first call will always be copper, since I love this business so dearly. Is the fact of finding solutions in order to maybe circumvent, barriers of entry. If you talk to the big exchanges of, okay, now we have to build this new layer one, so we need to find resources. And having seen, the integration of exchanges into Clearloop, you kind of have a little bit of a look behind the curtain of like, what it actually takes to just change the color of a button, because there are thousands of engineers. So if there is a strategy of how to alleviate this, cost base in order to get the entry over the line, I think there are ways of how we can do this relatively fast. Doesn't mean that it's going to be like an absolute home run, but it's very doable. And for that, of course, the relationships that have been forged over the years is helpful.
Okay. Looking at, I understand that you wanted to try something new after having built something very successful in copper, and I'm sure you've had many different possible opportunities, many routes you could have traveled. What made you think of Concordium? Because actually you reached out to me when you heard that we were looking for a CEO, and you said, "Sure, we have a conversation about this, Lars," and we had a fairly lengthy conversation, I would say. But what was it that made you reach out? What is it you see as potential in Concordium that triggered you?
I think so. The important point here, I think, and that's important because it, also with regards to price action, right, is how the current existing layer ones have performed or are performing due to what catalyst. In 2021, like the bull run that we've seen then, was very much centered around, DeFi was really the big push there. and given what happened in 2017 as well, which was very, very early, the voices over the course of, I can't tell you of how many panels I sat on between 2018 and 2021 of like, the institutions are coming, the institutions are coming. Nobody came because quite frankly, the infrastructure was not there in order to allow for it. So the catalyst in 2021 for me, and I think many others would agree, was the idea of DeFi, the idea of NFTs. Like those were the things that really were brewing and drawing attention, mainly from the existing crypto native world. What we've seen now is, and very early on, the discussions were there with regards to what's going to be the next one, what's going to be the big thing, and a lot of times the ETFs were dropped, right? The ETFs are going to be the thing that's going to ascend it stratospherically. Now, I would tend to disagree because those things will take time. And I think in the current market, if you look at it, I mean, we're currently sitting on if you look at like the daily charts, it's like a classic triple crown. I'm kind of missing that catalyst, coming back to why Concordium. In a world where, the rise of AI, the rise of identity as a whole, I think and I've had several experiences of this, impersonations, emails being sent out in my name from just stupid addresses, right? Very, very basic, tried phishing and scams that are out there. But also in the days of AI, the fact of the identity and you being you, verifiably, I think is a massive one, where the applications range from, if we take the reg compliant angle from Concordium in as well, the idea of onboarding to banks, onboarding to exchanges, onboarding to or simply just managing your access to your Netflix account. As simple as that. The full spectrum basically can be covered with what Concordium has built. And I'm not necessarily the absolute tech crack. I'm very open also to admit this. It comes down to the fact that anybody that I've known over the course of the last 7 years, which from cryptographers to some of the best developers, that also Copper has some of the best developers on the planet, blockchain developers, said this code base is extremely solid. Now, if I look and actually try to not create a problem that needs solving, but there is an actual problem that needs solving in the long run, in my opinion, looking at anything that's currently out there, with just a wider, a magnifying glass, there is nobody that can come even close to the capabilities that Concordium has built, which is where I see the gold, right? This is where I see of where you can really use that as a catalyst in order to position yourself correctly. Now, this is where the challenge comes in, and this is what I like. I like a challenge. Like, if there is anything, this has always been in my personality. If there is the steepest mountain in order to get to a certain point, I would always choose that one because it's like, at the end of the day, it's actually the most fun if you're on the top. So having that as a base layer from a pure technological standpoint, yes. Is it well documented? Is it easy accessible for the developer community? No, not right now. Because focus was missing, and at the end of the day, there is like, you do suddenly hundreds of things instead of doing 5 things properly. So yeah, that really what drew me in. The fact that there is this base product, the base technological layer that allows you to access a plethora of things, but where you now need to be very smart to focus on 2 specific things and make them your own. Exactly the same way as Copper did at the time. Institutional infrastructure, what do we need to build in order to satisfy for that problem of money coming into the space? That's exactly what we did. We didn't do anything else. And it's exactly the same point where Concordium is at right now, in my opinion.
So today is the 4th of September. You started on the 1st of September. So
it was a quiet Sunday.
So you've had 3 days to build a full plan. So could you please tell us the exact plan?
Yeah.
No, let me. Obviously, you're now learning more detail. I know you've known Concordium for quite a while, but there's a job to be done now just to get the overview and get the focus right and do stuff. So how are you going to go about things now, and what's your sort of short-term plan for getting getting cracking?
In many ways, I think. Excuse me. In many ways, I think if you are at the position that Concordium's in, some sort of a fresh start, which in many ways starts with management, right? Having made the decision to bring me on board, will come with further decisions in and around, the C-suite, like the leadership team itself. There is some reshuffling going on right now. More about to that over the course of the next couple of months, but you will see new faces. And what will happen, starting to dive into it, I think is quite straightforward. It's going to be a focus and a cleaning exercise over the course of the rest of this year, whereby in parallel formulating a strategy that is not only, as important the external community is. Right now, the external community is going to be gone very quickly if the internal people are not bought in, right? So that's really going to be my focus in order to say, why are we doing this? Why are we doing that? We should definitely double down on this. And have everybody accordingly across the departments in line in order to start executing on this from January 1st. Like, that is really my plan. I hope to get it forward, but also with like the reshuffling of the leadership team, I want them, of course, to have not only their input, they're the ones that ultimately are going to drive this, to make sure that we have that in place, which will encompass everything that has already been done, rightfully so. But there is always the problem of sometimes being a little bit too early, which I think is perfectly applicable to Concordium, as so like forward thinking, exactly like you did with Saxo Bank in the early days. Like, having a digital investment bank was in the 90s, like, who would be able to think of this? Now it seems to be normal. So in this instance, figuring out of what is existingly there that can be nurtured to the extent of it actually becoming, because there's so much, I mean, you know it, like, you've been on all the emails and internal, there is so much there. It's actually quite overwhelming. It's just a matter of boiling it down to the things that actually will have specifically a short-term impact. Even though I think on the Web 2 side, it will be more a long-term play, like that's going to be the solid foundation going forward. And what I definitely will put in place is a short-term strategy over the course of the next 9 to 12 months, so implement it over the course of the next 9 to 12 months, that covers things in and around some more crypto-native applications. And that doesn't necessarily mean, DEXs and so on. It will all, on both sides, leverage the core USP of what Concordium stands for in and around identity and regulatory compliance, which there are a lot of problems to solve. It just depends on how you are doing it.
That's an interesting subject that has been discussed in many different versions with the community internally on AMAs, questions about this and that, this sort of kind of dichotomy between having, some features that are necessary for serious businesses to get involved and be comfortable with it, but perhaps not sufficiently leveraging the fact that it's kind of a different user group out there in the earlier stages of crypto development. The crypto native versus sort of people coming from the outside and using blockchain to improve their processes. How do you see that balance? You touched upon it yourself.
I'm still convinced that a vast majority of the price action that we've seen from the approval of the ETF onwards is still the crypto native industry pushing it, because they see an opportunity. And even after the approval, you're still early. Like, to the point of having Australian superannuity funds buying the BlackRock ETF is might have already happened to a small portion, but like to the extent that they could, that didn't happen yet. And by all means, the IBIT, like the BlackRock ETF, is the most successful ETF ever created in terms of like the short term and the amount of money that has flown into it. So that part is doing its thing, but looking at the underlying metrics, the projects that are launching is not, Fortune 100 company suddenly going full Web3. It is still crypto native new businesses that are trying to make it quite frankly, and they face a lot of problems, which Concordium can alleviate. So if you kind of focus towards this and think about the idea of being able to onboard on various venues in seconds instead of doing selfies. It's the same applicable problem in the traditional world. You can take the strategy of dealing with just banks, which is start off in the innovation lab, 90% of the stuff dies a horrible death in there, and then the 10% might make it, and out of the 10%, the guy that was actually running it is suddenly at a new place because it was bonus time and now those guys offered more money, so goodbye to that guy, then you need to do it again. Those enterprise deals are a long cycle for it to actually either being pushed into production and actually being impactful to us. But on the other side, you've got a plethora of problems that need solving for a crypto native industry. It just is logical for me to dig there in the short term in order to have the community with everything from like exchange, like solving for liquidity and everything. If you do those couple of streams in parallel in a very, very thought through manner, with everybody internally and externally bought into this, I do not see how it can't be successful because the core USP is undoubtedly there.
So that sounds great. So basically, you're saying have some patience for the full sort of strategic plan till round about the end of year. You're gonna look at things. You're gonna reshuffle some people around the C-suite. You're gonna work on a strategic plan because communities are almost per definition a little bit impatient, and I know this community also in a way is impatient for news, but has also been patient with not always seeing everything they wanted. So the question I wanted to ask you is just as we're doing this talk now, and I've been doing my monthly AMAs in the past, I know that the community would like to also get a little bit of follow-up on what's actually happening. How do you see communication with the thousands of people that are actually watching us right now?
I am going to, really important, the word transparency is important if you deal with something this is a foundation, this is you've got a community to satisfy. And buy into, as much as the exercise for me at the very first is going to be in and around making sure that the internal, that the company is bought into the vision and what we're trying to achieve over the course of the next, specifically the short-term changes. It will be absolutely, see-through in terms of the communication for the community. Not only this, I'm actually trying to kind of put, I've been spending, for example, in our Telegram channel, which is thousands of people. I just want to tell everybody I'm spending time in there. I do read it, anything from the positive all the way to the negative, which is helpful. I have which sometimes really pisses my wife off. It's if in a restaurant the food's not good, I let people know that it is not good. Because if it's not good, the next guy's gonna get it, and he's maybe not saying anything, and then the restaurant just fizzles out. I wanna know, as the chef, that what I cooked is shit. So at the end of the day, this is the same thing. If there are certain things that you don't like, it is important for me and the entire company, the entire leadership team and the entire firm, because it will dictate of how we are positioning ourselves going forward. What do you think should happen? And we're going to take this into consideration. At the same token, I will flip it around. It doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to be monthly AMAs just with me. It's great to hear from the CEO, but I think it's far more important to hear, let's do a specific one on the tech stack. Let's do a specific one on the marketing bit. Let's do a specific one on the whole commercial side. And have more fun this way in terms of, again, it's all on the same level of focus. Let's focus on certain things, do them right, move on, and not do 100 things at 5% and not 5 at 100. It's just, it really actually boils down as simple as this. So in terms of transparency, you can expect me to speak to you whenever you want. And I will make sure that anything that we agree in terms of a strategic plan is clearly communicated to the entire community and any stakeholder of the firm.
So looking a little bit broader than Concordium, right? Like, I was early part of the internet, and in the beginning it wasn't going that fast, a little bit like what you see in blockchain sometimes, but you always had this feeling, this thing could really change the world and could change a lot of business models, etc. And that's the kind of feeling I had with blockchain when I first began to take an interest in it. And just like the internet, it's taking a while, perhaps, before you see all these great things that blockchain could do, Concordium or other applications. What's your view of this industry? I mean, what will its impact be, and how important is it for, let's say, the next 5 or 10 years for industry as a whole?
I think we passed the point where you can discuss or try to string together an argument why blockchain as a technology, anything in and around the decentralization of a ledger where information is being stored, where information is being processed, makes sense. Like there is just no doubt that eventually it will happen. What it comes with is that you actually go up against if paradigm shifts like this supposed to happen, you are dealing with the old paradigm. And the old paradigm, in many ways, has its ways of trying to defend having to change, because change is never fun, right? So given in terms of like the lifespan of where like blockchain specifically is, because people still, but it's getting better, people still confuse sometimes blockchain and crypto. Crypto is an application. Like the underlying technology is the one that actually needs pushing. And what you can do with it is endless. So where I think we are in terms of the cycle, if you want to, and like the comparisons to the internet is always coming up, right? But the reason why it, let's put it this way, I remember having watched this interview, I think it was Bill Gates with Conan O'Brien or Letterman. And he goes like, well, yeah, but now you can go onto this website and it tells you what the weather is. And the guy says, why do I need this? I have the newspaper. It's like, those are the same arguments that you have right now for various applications, right? A homepage, look at it as any chain, right? But there are loads of different applications. So where do I think we are in the cycle? With regards to a blockchain by itself, if this would be the only innovation that we are in right now from a tech perspective, I think it would take much longer. But the wonderful brains around this planet have created other innovations in and around AI, in and around the next thing that's going to come is quantum computing. Actually, a good friend is Charles Hoskinson, for example, is somebody that is very vocal about this holy trinity of AI, blockchain, and quantum computing. So I think we're now at the point where undoubtedly blockchain is here to stay. The market now needs to figure out of how to actually implement it, and there is already a lot of work that is being done. And the catalysts are there as well, which again, like just simply on the topic of AI, what an incredible role Concordium can play in terms of identity. If you've got loads of agents running around out there, you want to make sure that it's actually that you gave them the green light to do so. More importantly, on the other side, sitting somebody that listens to the stuff that is being said by that agent, you want to make sure that it is actually from the person that I want to hear it from. So anything in and around this, you don't want to centralize those, because in terms of like centralizing that type of information and verification, because if you do that, I mean, what was it like a couple of weeks ago? The servers didn't work and planes needed to be grounded. Everything came to a standstill. Australia didn't have the internet. Like everything goes back into the dark ages in a minute. So those are the things that a lot of people are thinking about. Us as Concordium, we need to have the core infrastructure in order to allow to be built on it. Same as copper has the infrastructure to allow institutional, financial markets to operate. It's basically that process. But if you ask me like this, still early. But not as early as last year and not as early as 5 years ago. But yeah, that's the way that I would see it.
There's a lot of conspiracy theorists in our space, right? That the world as is basically trying to block this because they're going to lose control of it. They're going to not be able to manipulate data the way that they want to. They actually don't like decentralization. They prefer to have centralized control. And I think there's some truth in that in some matters. But how do you see that? Is it inevitable, or is there the risk of a pushback from people that actually benefit from centralized structures?
The pushback is already there. It depends which sector, right? I mean, this is like a topic where we could talk for hours, and I would rub up a lot of people by saying what I really think. But at the end of the day, if we just take financial services, right? This is financial services is a very elite club, which is being guarded by the regulators and ultimately guarded by big institutions that make sure that nobody can get in. It's an onerous process, but the idea of cost cutting, for example, is a very welcomed one, unsurprisingly, because you cut cost, you make more money, everybody's greedy. So in this instance, for example, if I just take this like industry as an example, you do see the right things happening. State Street, Bank of New York Mellon, JP Morgan got Onyx. Like there are Goldman Sachs is doing things. So at the end of the day, you kind of sneak in because very deep down they do agree that if implemented correctly, this is far better than the shit that they currently have. So. But what they're also aware of, and everybody else needs to be aware of, that a change like this doesn't happen. You don't just switch off the old system on a Monday, midnight, and Tuesday, have a seamless takeover. That's just not how it works. So the time factor, if you take the traditional world as kind of an anchor to measure success for that industry, in my opinion, is the wrong approach. It's the new industries that are coming up, how quickly they adopt that new layer of technology is far more important. That will not ultimately challenge, but what will happen is they just get bought, they get taken over and ultimately integrated. So does that make sense? Have I been just waffling? Have I just been waffling?
No, I don't But I think, the banks and the financial sector is obviously always going to be a little bit mistrusted by most of the people in this industry, and with some justification, So I think, and you're absolutely right. Again, not to waffle about the internet, but when we're trying to convince people it would be much easier to trade on the internet instead of using phones,
Correct.
The guys that were using the phones didn't think, or were manning the phones didn't think it was such a great idea, right? So I guess it's always.
But it ultimately was a money.
It
ultimately was a money thing. Yeah. People like it or not, but it ultimately was a money decision that people say, standing around a pit screaming and throwing paper left, right, and center, that electronic trading is more efficient and actually keeps more money in your pocket. Yes, I want to hear more. So it's literally this, but that's just financial services, right? But like anything in and around, anything around artificial intelligence, anything in and around, ESG or like carbon credit, like every single industry that you currently see out there, you have applications if you're willing to embrace them, or they come in a way modularized as a product that you see solve a certain problem and you're happy to implement it. So yeah, it really comes down to making sure that you do the right thing for a specific thing.
So on specifics, to give people, you guys out there, a little bit of news, should we offer a little bit of news? I was thinking like, we, as you know, we have an office in Copenhagen and we have an office in Aarhus, where we, both in Denmark, we have a small office in Zurich, and actually we soon will have another office, right?
Well, we have it since today. We opened the office in London. I'm based in London, but more importantly, I think in terms of like, if you look at Europe, the talent in and around Britain when it comes to blockchain, crypto, is solid. So yeah, decided to open up there, and of course with everybody that there is on the ground, there are already quite a few people there, planning to grow in line with success. So new office, anybody who wants to drop by. It's going to be, there are a couple of good bars around. I'll happily buy somebody a drink and listen to what you have to say.
Well, of course, as a Dane, you know that Copenhagen is the de facto center of the world.
Oh,
right?
no, of course, yeah, sorry.
But what additional benefits do you see from us being in London? I mean, you already adhered to there's a good talent pool there, but I guess there's a lot of infrastructure people, investors, etc.
Infrastructure, investors as well, but also certain corporations that are a possible target for us. So it kind of makes sense. People, the voices were loud after Brexit. Like London is going to go down the sorry, I'm trying to use the right word, but it's like and it actually didn't happen. London is still the center point with anything that comes from the east, and also kind of is the vocal point and the key, the first call if anything from Europe goes to America, simply also because of the language. So it kind of makes sense to be there. Also, yeah, the network that's there is solid, and there is a lot where companies like ours would find themselves in a successful position. That doesn't mean that anything, we're going to stay true also to Denmark and of course Switzerland with the foundation. But in terms of like as an operative office, it made sense to me, and I convinced you relatively quickly that I think we should do this there. And yeah, happy to share that it is open as of today.
Very good. Yeah, I mean, I
more global.
I lived in London for a number of years when I was in TradFi, and clearly there's an energy and a knowledge base in anything to do with technology, with finance, etc. So which is also the case for crypto. So I'm very pleased that we are now also present in London, and looking forward to both see the office and one of those pubs you mentioned, right? So I'll pop over there as soon as possible. Now, we did promise that we'd maybe leave room for a question or two.
Mm-hmm.
I haven't actually got that many questions, but there's one here that I think you might want to expand on a little bit. You talk about crypto-native cases, but how do you view the entire business size where large enterprises need to adopt blockchain into their processes? How do you see Concordium's position here? Should we comment a bit on that?
So basically, let me read this again, sorry. You talk about crypto-native cases, how do you view the entire business side where large enterprises need to adopt blockchain in their processes? I think we kind of covered this.
Yeah,
it depends what the use case is, right? You have the more boring sense of which, by the way, a lot of like, if not every big corporate in the world has agreed to the fact that for example, for internal repositories, the blockchain makes sense. Simply to just know where things are. It's like, but if you take it a step further, what's kind of missing in that question is, I think, based on what, and the based on what is the USP that Concordium has. If you think about, again, your identity, and if anything that is wrapped around us in terms of a compliance need, you will find a use case that can be structured with what Concordium has. So to kind of put this into a different, like turn the questions on its head, what the plan is, or what my plan is going forward, is to identify those couple of use cases instead of them coming to us coming to them to solve their problem. What exactly that is, I cannot tell you yet. It's definitely going to be centered around identity. It's definitely going to be centered around compliance. But what exactly it is, you will know no later than the end of this year. So that's how Concordium's position is, in terms of making sure that we tackle not just random stuff being built eventually. Like if we get to the size of Ethereum, the foundation has no clue who's currently building on their chain. Like, that's fine. Let anybody build on Concordium down the line as they wish to do with the tool set that is being given. At the beginning, I think in order to get it properly off the ground, we need to be very, very targeted and very, very focused in order to make sure that we are covering use cases that we more bring to the client rather than vice versa.
So I think we're sort of approaching a wrap-up point for this conversation. Is there stuff that you feel we haven't covered that we should have talked about, or anything else you want off your chest here on these first days?
I'm going to get a lot of things off my chest, internally and externally, but it's not at this stage. Like, I really want to, it kind of feels weird that we did this, like it's nice to do the introduction, but I actually would like to come with more flesh on the bone, which is what I'm going to be doing, which is what we are going to be doing over the course of the next couple of weeks and months. So as much as, and at that point, we're going to stay on point for something specific and give you the full-fledged idea around it of why we are going to do this. So let's kind of keep this there. I'm just happy to meet everybody. And yeah, like I said, through the various channels that we have, I really do take the time to read this and take it in. Because in the early stages like this, it's very important to kind of get a good detailed picture painted. So, yeah.
That's great. Great to have you on board, Boris. I look forward to the cooperation and a bright future. I'd also like to thank everyone for tuning in today. As I said, I think at the outset, bringing Boris on board as a new CEO is the completion of a process that has lasted for quite some time, but it's very nice to have it completed, which also means that I will sort of revert to a slightly more withdrawn chairman role, so you will see less of me going forward. I'm still around. I'll still be available if there's anything I can do for anyone and help the overall governance of the project as chairman of the board of the foundation. But going forward, I expect to see more of Boris and less of me. And I thank you all for tuning in for this session and for all the many good conversations we had in the past. And as I always say, you can do your bit as well to help the project when we announce something, when we release content, like it, share it, comment on it, get engaged, bring other people to our communities, because as Boris also adhered to, we have something that's important for the world and is well built, and not a lot of other people necessarily have the same thing. So help us spread the word and be good till we speak again. Thank you very much for listening.
you.